So as you know, I do watch other YouTubers. I try to keep a steady diet. I don't want to be one of these YouTubers that the bigger I get, the more I ignore other people. So I watch mostly music related content and other stuff as well. And I still respond to all the commenters on my videos. I think it's important to stay humble in this endeavor. One video I came across lately that caught me my attention was a video by the chap named Dave Simpson, who does a number of videos on guitars and music and whatnot. I think he's pretty popular. He's a character. He's a really interesting bloke and very passionate about what he does. And he posted a video recently called "Does Music Mean Anything Anymore?" which was, he called it a rant, but I thought it was an impassioned plea for about 40 minutes on what he called the cheapening of music in modern culture and railing against it. And I thought it was really interesting, so I thought I'd do a video response. I agreed with a lot of what he said, and I share a lot of the same fears. It bothers me as well that music means less to vast amounts of people, and that our modernizing technological culture in some ways seems to be bypassing music and making people less dependent on it as an entertainment source, perhaps developing a different kind of relationship to it. And certainly for many people in the world, music has become a free commodity, a cheap commodity or a free commodity, a convenience commodity, something that goes on in the background. I agree with all that, and I agree with all of his concerns, and I agree with all his criticisms about modern culture. I would say, however, that if you spend any amount of time on YouTube, one thing that becomes clear to you is there is still a massive, let's call it a counterculture, and against the grain culture that absolutely adores music, certainly flocks to certain types of music. I mean, just look at all the people just doing heavy metal videos. I watched a guy named Necrotic Nick do his 40 best albums of the year video the other day, and for each of the 40 albums he produced a CD. So here's somebody who doesn't just stream or listen to them on Spotify. He buys them all. Maybe he gets some sent to him for his channel, but I imagine that he buys a lot of them. So there are lots of people out there that still love music, are impassioned by music, are music nerds or audiophiles, and buy albums, still buy physical media, collect physical media. Look at the vinyl community on YouTube. Look at the number of people showing their CD collections, vinyl collections, even cassette collections are coming back. Also, look at the plethora of new talent in every instrument you can conceive of on YouTube. I'd say 20 years ago we were worried that everybody was becoming computer nerds and no one was learning guitar anymore. And although those trends are still there, when you look at the pure numbers, there are probably more people moving into technological / business enterprises rather than learning instruments, but there are still lots of people learning instruments, and the level of technicality has really improved as we've all gained access to the means of learning. For instance, you can go on, there are probably thousands of YouTube channels of guys 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 that play guitar and are better than we could ever be, my generation. It's amazing what's out there. I mean, I saw a video the other day of a guy that plays the Hammond dulcimer that was absolutely stunning. Just a kid, absolutely stunning, the level of virtuosity. So music is not dead. Whether you're talking about listening culture or about the playing culture, it's still there. However, it is a minority, and we have to say yes to Dave's question. Music does not mean anything to the vast populace, to the majority. We are a minority. Those of us that live our lives around music, we are a minority. Those of us that collect vinyl or CDs, we are a minority. But we are a sizable minority, and we are the ones that you, as musicians and as passionate players and collectors, should concentrate on. Forget the masses. I am always complaining about people my age. So let's say anywhere between 35 and 60 or 65, all right? That demographic, I've made it a large one. The majority of them don't collect albums, don't buy new music, don't support talent, musical talent, go to very few shows, and have very much embraced the sort of streaming culture and the very passive music listening culture where music is just a filler. And it doesn't really matter what you listen to, just if it's mildly entertaining and sort of fills the void, that's good enough. That is the majority. And when I learned a hard lesson when I started making my own music. I do a project called Lunatric and put out music under my own name as well as other projects. One hard lesson I had to learn is, the first thing I did is I went out to all my friends and family and said, hey, I put this out. Went out to my social media, hey, I put this out. Isn't that great? Support me. And the amount that you get back is staggeringly paltry. You'll be flabbergasted by how few people care or can be bothered to support your musical endeavors, no matter how good you are. However, as I've said on this channel before, I get random strangers downloading my music in Slovenia, or I get people sending me emails saying, hey, I listened to this and it really touched me. I'm in South Africa, and those are the people, it's the people that love music and are willing to listen to new music that you should concentrate on, that you should write your music and do your music for. Forget the masses. And that would be my main answer to Dave, is forget the masses. To hell with the masses. The people that no longer require music or art in general as part of their lives, you can just forget them. They're not going to buy your album. They're not going to download your songs. Concentrate on the people that will. There are millions of them. There are millions of us out there. We may be a minority, but it's still a sizable market. Every genre that you can think of, there is a little market somewhere, or a little internet group somewhere that you didn't know about that supports a certain kind of music, whether it's gypsy punk or polka punk or whatever. It doesn't matter. You'll find little tiny scenes, if you like. Now, one of Dave's complaints on his video is there's no music scene anymore. There's no chance for a Nirvana to break through. There's no chance for a Hendrix or a Zeppelin. Those days are gone. The music culture has changed. And to a point, he's right. When we were younger, I grew up in the 80s. That was my music training decade. We all knew what was popular. There was a thing called the charts. There was a thing called Top of the Pops. There was a thing called the Old Grey Whistle Test in England, where if a band got big and a song got big, you became conscious of it. And we were all kind of watching the same things, and we all knew. When Don't You Want Me Baby became #1, everybody in the country knew that was the hot song. It's different now because the ways of distributing music have become so disparate and so varied that you can put something out in the world of the internet and it'll grab a fairly portionable size of listenership and become a top 10 single, but you still won't hear of it because we're not all tuned to the same things anymore. When I watch these music videos of guys like the metal guys on YouTube, they're all like plugged into different resources, and within that little community they know what's popular, what's banging, but the wider world does not. and something can get quite big, and most people don't know about it just because we don't have a singular channel. We don't have a singular consciousness about music anymore. It just explodes in these little pockets of the internet universe. I mean, I'm not talking about Billie Eilish and stuff like that breaks, you know, sort of on the old-fashioned larger level. I'm talking about, you know, new music that just comes and goes, that gets pretty big. It has a following, but doesn't really spark mass consciousness. The majority of people don't know about it. So yes, the scene is tough, and he was saying he would hate to be a band trying to break through like an Oasis, because they're never going to have that opportunity. And it's true, the landscape has changed. For one thing, the way we record now. I mean, the whole idea was to gig until you got noticed and got picked up by a major label or a thriving label, and then you put your album out and you toured and you sort of worked your way into those channels that we talked about that everybody was conscious of. MTV, whether it was Headbangers Ball or 120 Minutes if you were an alternative act. If you got on there, you became part of the mass consciousness. That's gone. That's true. And also the sheer quantity of people putting out music. So if you put out an album today, let's say you put an album out in 1988 and you looked at all the people that put an album out that week, it would be maybe a dozen, you know, maybe 15 artists that you were competing with. If you put an album out today, you have all the people that put albums out on what's left of the major labels, and that's a topic all of itself. Then you have all the people that put out an album on the minor aspiring up-and-coming labels. And then you have, you know, people who put out music on their own labels, or they put their own music out. And that used to be, you know, bedroom musicians, but now you get serious professional musicians that are foregoing working with labels, that are setting up their own distributorship and doing it on their own. You know, I mean, it started with people like 9 Inch Nails and U2, you know, producing and putting out their own albums, but now it's becoming kind of a main thing. And what that means is the technology has made it easier for us to produce music, and that's great. I can do an album this week, and I, from this room right here, do albums, whole albums. I don't need a label. I have my own. I got my own distributorship. I go through my own channels. I put my music out there, and that's great. It's made it easier for me, but the bad thing about that is there are millions of other people doing it, and that's my competition. So I can put out a really, really good album tomorrow and try, making the album is not a problem, but when I try to get attention for it and market it, it's almost impossible to get attention. It's the toughest thing about making music. And so, you know, I would say, in answer to Dave's concerns, it's not really that you're fighting an uncaring populace. That's true. It's that, you know, the sheer competition kills a lot of people. I know a lot of bands and artists who put out absolutely brilliant works, and it just gets lost in the ether. It comes out, there's a little splash, a few people buy it, and then there's something else coming out right after it. And it never really gets that huge attention that it deserves. So it is really hard for someone to become the new Nirvana or something like that, with the way it's set up now. So in many ways it's better, it's easier, we can all compete, but it's way worse because the gene pool is now absolutely crowded and everyone can put out music. It's the same with books, it's the same with digital art. All of the art forms are suffering in the digital age because everyone can do it, and everyone does it. So you've got, you know, just huge amounts of music releases going out into the world, and trying to get yours noticed is a nightmare. Of course, the old-fashioned way of getting your music noticed, which is gigging, can't be beat. I mean, you know, if you can gig as often as possible and have a CD table at the back of the room and your merchandise, that's probably still the best way of selling your wares or selling your music. People are likely to buy a CD or a t-shirt if they see your band and they have a couple of drinks and they're loosened up. You know, but if you're online saying buy my music, listen to my video, so you might get people to watch it, but getting people to buy is another step that most people won't take because everybody's very passive about music. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the place on this response, and Dave was on his delivery as well. So I'm trying to touch all points. He talks about how albums are dead and everything is singles. Well, let's look at this. Albums really had a short lifetime, if that's the case, because in the 50s and 60s it was all singles. There were no LPs. Long players came in somewhere around the early to mid 60s. You can see in the Beatles' career, for instance, the Beatles started out with singles, and then slowly they put out memorable albums. Their early albums were just collections of symbols. So this idea of album is a relatively new musical concept. It became, vogue in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s to put out albums, concept albums, albums that tell a story, that work together. And then we had the advent of digitization, but I don't think that started people's desire to have playlists. If you'll remember in the 90s, we all used to make mixtapes. Do you remember that? Cassette mixtapes. It was a pain in the ass. You had to make a tape at the same time as listening to the song, and you'd fill up mixtapes with different combinations of songs, and you'd swap them with your friends. That was the beginning of streaming consciousness, before the digital age. And all that Spotify and iTunes has done is allowed us to make that easier. So, him saying singles trump albums, that's not quite true. I don't think it's the age of singles either. I think it's the age of streaming ease, where you can basically have your own little radio station either on your iTunes, through a podcast, or through Spotify, or through Pandora or something like that. Now, instead of listening to albums, people listen to collections of songs that they like. So they can take all the songs they like and put them all together and make their own little album, if you like. Yes, the digitization of music, particularly Spotify, starting with Napster and, of course, moving on to Spotify and Pandora, has hurt the album. However, I go back to my original point. There are still millions of people out there that love albums and buy albums, and it's those people that you have to concentrate on. I have thousands of albums. I still buy albums. I don't like downloading music. I still like physical media. I know people like that. We are a minority. There's not many of us left. But I think we're still enough to create a marketplace. And it's hard. It's hard as a musician to write off most of the populace and say, okay, I'm going to concentrate on this group of people. They're who I need to target. They're who I need to get my music to. They're the ones that are going to listen to it. It may not include your friends. It may not include your relatives. It probably won't include your relatives. Most relationships online are casual relationships, and getting someone to open a video link to watch a video or to listen to a song is really, really tough. It's a step too far for a lot of people. We do have a dwindling attention span. And he's, Dave was right. 2 minutes 50 seconds is what people want from a song. And I've actually sat with younger people who are trying to show me music, and they'll listen to the first third, and once they've heard a verse and chorus, they click to the next one. They don't want to linger for the whole 5 minutes. They want to consume more in the amount of time that we have. And I think this is something that iTunes and Spotify has done as well. When we all got iPods in the late 90s and shuffles and all that sort of stuff, the idea was to have as much music on a device as possible, to have the largest playlist, to have thousands of songs, but to listen to very few of them. So, we had this irony where we had the technology to compile millions of songs in one small place, but at the same time, the variance of our listening practices shrunk. And that's one of the odd things about that time period. And now, most people, if we're going back to the masses, most people require very few songs, a very small sliver of what's coming out, if anything at all. Most people my age listen to the same 10 bands that they grew up with. well, guys, particularly men my age, listen to all the formative bands that were big in their teenage years, and they kind of despise or decry music coming out today. You hear the adage all the time, you know, music's no good anymore, it's not like it was in the 60s and 70s, blah, blah, blah. That's become a meme, and it's become accepted, and it's become an excuse why people don't support new music. Now, there is a lot of garbage today, but another thing we've got to stop doing, and I criticized a number of people for doing this, particularly Rick Beato. I had a go at him, although I don't think he's guilty of doing it all the time. But another thing I would say to Dave in response is forget what's popular. Don't judge music by what's popular. You know, he talked about the vast amount of glossy, shallow songs that passes music today. Well, you're talking about you know, the glut of popular artists, the slick, TV ready pop stars, you know, the image queens and stuff like that. You know, forget all that. Don't make that the yardstick for today's music. There are thousands of bands out there. There are thousands of artists out there that are unique, that are trying to be different, that do put out interesting music, that are struggling like we are to get listenership, that put out albums that get ignored, that don't make any money, that work 2-3 jobs. So again, concentrate on that, on them. Look for them. You have to dig deeper these days. There is no MTV. There is no Headbangers Ball. There is no... Well, there might be, but it's not what it used to be. It doesn't attract the same amount of people. Now you have millions of people heading to millions of channels rather than millions of people heading to 1 or 2 outlets. We don't all share the same taste. You have to go digging. You have to go down rabbit holes. I spent whole evenings chasing down, like last night. I found a band called Circuit de Yeux that is absolutely incredible. And I'm like, I'm an audiophile. I study music. How did I miss this band? How could this be a thing? And I missed it. It's been going on for years. That happens to me all the time. You know, I suddenly hear a band. I'm like, I've never heard of them. How come I've never heard of them? And then I'll spend a whole evening going through their back catalogue and doing some research on the musicians. Maybe, you know, buying a few, ordering a CD or something like that. That's because music is endless. It is endless. You can't let, you know, the Avril Lavignes and the Britney Spears be the standard for modern music. If you go out into the larger world, there are thousands of bands. Just in metal alone, there are loads and loads of innovators. Just in folk or neo-folk or you know, alternative or prog, there's a whole thriving prog scene. It supposedly was killed off by punk in the 70s, but it's back. It's been back. There's a whole scene out there that's listening to sort of new prog, metal prog, stuff like that. Look for that. Don't worry about popularity. Last thing I want to comment on is he talked about reality TV killing music and shows like The Voice and people like Simon Cowell. I share your despising of people like that and shows like that. I don't watch them. I don't know who's judging on them. I do know that they encourage musicians to put out music to a certain commercial standard within a certain box of acceptable delivery, pandering to a certain audience that it has been bred on, you know, the utmost in populist music. So you're not going to, that's not going to produce Nirvanas and Pixies and stuff like that either. That's going to produce, you know, the guy that sings like Freddie Mercury that Queen picked up. I think it was from The Voice on one of those shows. Adam Levine? I can't remember the guy's name, but that's the kind of music talent that format is going to generate. It's not going to give you a Buzzcocks. It's not going to give you Gary Newman or anything like that, or a Bowie. It's just not. Those are, you know, very much glitzy talent shows that pander to popular tastes. And lastly, they've made music a sport. They made music a sport. They made it competitive. All of these shows where musicians compete against each other are now popular. When you go on YouTube, it's all about top 10 lists. It's all about best of the year albums, or albums I don't like, albums I do like. Nobody enjoys music for what it is. Nobody lets music happen. We're so busy evaluating. We've made it a sport. And perhaps one of the things that these reality TV shows has done that's hurt music culture is this idea that music is supposed to compete with each other. We've always had it because we've always had the top 10, the top 40, that kind of stuff. So music by nature competes because everybody's trying to get it out to the public. But I think we've reached new levels of competitiveness. Now when you watch a new guitar guy on YouTube and you go look at the comments, it's all about he's better than him, he's better than him, he blows him away, he smokes him. It's that consciousness. It's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that this person's not as good as another guitarist. Listen to what he's doing, what he's saying, what he has to say. You know, music is not a sport, and we've made it a sport in this generation. We need to get away from that. There is some music that is purposely technical. They're trying to impress you with their theoretical and technical prowess. There is other music that's purely trying to create a vibe or a sound or an atmosphere, where they're not trying to impress you with technicalities and music theory. You've got to let both types of music be. They don't compete with one another. So that's the last thing that I would say is forget all those talent shows. Forget The Voice. I don't watch him. I don't care for him. I don't really care how Sharon Osbourne or whatever judge they've got on there now, you know, how they evaluate music. It's the least thing in the world interesting to me. I couldn't care less. Who are they anyway? The judges they pick are usually people that have 1 or 2 hits and all of a sudden they're experts. Forget that. Concentrate on where the music is. Concentrate on where the listenership is. Play for those people. Market to those people, and join discussion groups with those people, swap records with those people.